This is Word and the Wild. It's the 1 year Bible adventure with friends. My name is Owen. I'm your host and your guide, and I'm delighted to be together with you on this 12-month journey as a podcast plus community where we read the Bible for ourselves, but not by ourselves. Guys, it's week 32. We've only got 20 weeks to go. Now, if you've been feeling like the story stalled out a little bit as we've been wading through these prophets, waiting for God to make his next move, guess what? God has made his next move, and in his own words, what happens next is unbelievable. So, welcome and hello to you. Special welcome goes out to our Word and the Wild Plus community members. It's their support of this nonprofit endeavor that makes space for all of us here on this Bible reading adventure. You know who you are, and thank you. As part of the Word and the Wild Plus tribe, they enjoy access to our private, safe, online space where no honest question is a dumb question, along with weekly live stream Q&As, bonus content, articles, interactions, meetups, and even some live stream teaching gatherings with yours truly. And so if you've been looking for a way, craving a way to dive into the Bible and understand what it's all about, you've found the podcast. Now it's time to jump in to the community part of this thing. You know, we're going to be hitting the New Testament soon, so check the show notes for how to become a member yourself or get all the details over at wordandthewild.com. Join us before we hit the New Testament. Get a running start at it now. Again, check the show notes for how to do it, or check it out over at wordandthewild.com. That's wordandthewild.com. All right, now we're going to move forward in our story, but first let's look back at Habakkuk and God's next unbelievable step in our story. Well, as we look back at what happened last week, I can't help but chuckle at a comment made by one of our Word and the Wild Plus community members. When I asked her how things were going for her on the journey so far, she just let out a big sigh and said, "I'm ready for the New Testament." No doubt, no doubt. And if you feel that way, imagine how the Israelites in our story feel right about now. In fact, one of the voices in last week's section of the story, it was a man named Habakkuk. Remember him? The little prophet with the funny name, I guess, Habakkuk. Well, in the face of all that he sees happening in the culture of his day, and the way the Israelites are struggling, all he can do is walk up to God with two perfect questions. I love these questions. Habakkuk goes to God and he says, "How long?" And he says, "How could you?" How long must we watch the downward spiral of God's people before God intervenes? And then when Habakkuk hears God's response, he has a shocked reaction. He says, "God, how could you? How could you ever let that happen?" Now, I absolutely love Habakkuk and his honest questions. So real, so relatable. We all have been at places where we feel stuck. We feel desperate for God to do anything. I mean, anything. We need some help to get us back on track, whether we see that as an individual or a family or even a nation. Well, that's Habakkuk's headspace. He's like, "God, you've got to do something." But what God reveals to Habakkuk buckles Habakkuk's knees, literally. Here's what God tells him. He says, "Look around at the nations. Look and be amazed, for I am doing something in your own day, something you wouldn't believe even if someone told you about it. I'm raising up the Babylonians, a cruel and violent people. They will march across the world and conquer other lands. They are notorious for their cruelty and do whatever they like." God's words to Habakkuk from chapter 1, verses 5 through 7 of the book that bears his name, page 119 in your Chrono Bible. Now, Habakkuk has a good perspective. He sees accurately what's wrong with his culture. And God is moving to solve the problem. But how's he going about it? Well, as God revealed just above what we talked about, God is about to let the bad guys win. Or at least it's going to seem like the bad guys win for a while. And the bad guys are the Babylonians. They are a powerful, cruel, violent people. And the Babylonians are about to bring this season of our epic story to an end. If we think of it like seasons of a show, we've been in the middle of a season, and the Babylonians are going to be the season ender. And not only is God allowing them to do it, did you notice what it said up there? It said that God says, I'm raising up the Babylonians. And that is a real shock. The season we've been in of the show, the season of the show, if you want to call it that, has been called A House Divided. A civil war split the Israelites into two struggling, scrappy kingdoms. We've had Israel in the south and the kingdom of Judah in the north. Now, Assyria knocked out Israel a while back, and Babylon will soon finish the job. They're going to come in, wipe out Judah, and pry God's people out of the promised land. Now, more on the why behind God's methods for solving the problem, let's call it that, the problem of his people's disloyal relationship with him. More on why in a minute. But first, before we do that, we've got to give a shout out to Isaiah. He's been another one of the major voices we've been hearing from the past couple of weeks. And if it weren't for the fact that Isaiah has already given us a big window into the plot points for this whole story that we are in, we'd be tempted to think that what that mighty Babylon is about to do to the tiny kingdom of Judah will end the whole story. I mean, it is absolutely a mismatch. But thanks to Isaiah, along with other voices we've heard like Micah, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, we do know that what's about to go down with Babylon and Judah, it's not the end of the season. It's not the end of the story. It's the end of the season. It's the end of this chapter. It's not all ending here. And man, what a view it is outside of Isaiah's window. You know what I mean? We've been hungry to get into the New Testament. I know many of us have. I've been hearing from you. But do you realize that what's new in the New Testament isn't a new story? A lot of people think so. That's a misconception. The New Testament is not a new story. It's a continuation of this story. It's certainly not a new God. There's not an Old Testament God and a New Testament God. No, what's new about the New Testament is new detail on how the Old Testament story actually happens, how we get from where we are now to the end of the story. And you don't have to look any further than Isaiah himself to actually zoom out and see the entire plot. Old Testament, New Testament, everything. Seriously. Isaiah, he makes a real pivot point in our adventure. This is in some ways like the top of the mountain peak where we climb up, we get a look around, a panoramic look around everything. Up until now, with Isaiah, we've been unraveling the mystery of where the story is taking us, right? We started in the beginning. God created, and we've been following our main character, the creator God, through the story. And it's been a winding road. We've been discovering as we go more about God himself, and then also more about this story that we are in, that the Bible is talking about, right? But up until this point, it's been a mystery in some ways. Where is the story taking us? But thanks to Isaiah, we know exactly where this whole story goes. Isaiah shows us. He lays out the whole storyboard for us. And then from this point forward, we're not going to be asking as many of those where questions, like where are we headed with this? We're going to be asking more of the how questions and the when questions and the why questions. How will God pull this story off? When will these things happen? When will it all go down? Why are we in this story in the first place? See, Isaiah doesn't give us everything in a linear fashion, just A, B, C, D outline format, for the most part. A little bit of that, but not much. It's like he gives us a roadmap to the future, but before he hands it to us, he chops it up into a dozen pieces and throws it all on the floor. But with a little bit of patience, we can pick up the pieces, we can put them all together, and we can get the major moments in the epic story that the Bible wants to tell. So let me pull out my roll of tape, get all the pieces that Isaiah's chopped up for us, and stick it all together and put it on the wall for us. Okay, I want to show you Isaiah's roadmap, starting from his lifetime all the way into the future to the end of the story. Okay, just from Isaiah, just from what we know from Isaiah. Okay, here is what the roadmap looks like from this point in the story all the way to the very end. There are 7 major plot points we get from Isaiah, at least. All right, here's my 7. Number 1, there are dark times ahead. The Israelites will eventually go into exile, but they will also return from exile. First plot point. Then, at some time in the future, a son will be born. Remember this? This son will have a virgin birth, so it's going to be miraculous in some way. We also know from Isaiah that this son will come to Galilee. Remember, Galilee gets called out by name there in Isaiah chapter 9. This son will also bring God's presence to his people. He's going to be called Emmanuel, which means God with us. We get that from Isaiah chapter 7. And he will rule, this son will rule as king forever. All of that from Isaiah. So a son will be born. Here's the third thing that's going to happen. That son will give birth to a family. And that family will be a non-biological family. We're talking a non-bio family, meaning they're not related to the son by blood or by ethnicity. Okay, that's the third plot point. So dark times are ahead. A son will be born. A son will give birth to a family. Here's number 4. We know that someone known as God's servant will arise. And he will be sent by God, he will suffer, and he will save his people from their sins, thus repairing the broken relationship between God and God's people. That's plot point number 4. So, dark times are ahead. A son will be born. A son will give birth to a family. And God's servant will arise. Okay, then number 5. Here's another little tantalizing bit we know from the future, based on Isaiah's picture of it. Here it is. God will pour out his spirit on his people. Now, we don't get much detail from Isaiah on this, but we see it. It's there. Then number 6, at some point on Isaiah's roadmap, out there in the future, is something that's a real doozy. It's hard to read. It's hard to wrap your mind around, but it's unmistakably there. And it's simply this: the earth will be destroyed. I mean, the whole thing. Every nation, everything. And the sins of humanity will be the cause of the destruction. That's from Isaiah. So, recap so far. First, dark times are ahead. Second, a son will be born. Third, a son will give birth to a family. This son will give birth to that family. Number 4, someone known as God's servant will arise and be a suffering savior. Then 5, God will pour out his spirit on his people. Then 6, the earth will be destroyed at some time in the future. And then at the end of the road, number 7, Isaiah tells us God remakes the earth and rules forever as its king. Isaiah is clear. He tells us Jerusalem will be God's capital city. He says every knee will bow from every nation in recognition of his kingship. He also says the earth itself will flourish again. Death will be defeated, sorrow will disappear, and God's people will be redeemed and resurrected to live and party with God forever. All of that strictly from Isaiah. No other voices, no other places in the Bible, just Isaiah. I mean, wow. That's unbelievable, right? Those waypoints on the trail, that roadmap of the future. Going forward, the Bible story will follow them. That's where we are headed. Now, we may get more detail as we go, but that's the plot of the story. That's the path we're walking as we go down the trail on this epic adventure. Isaiah shows us what will happen. Pretty incredible, actually. And because of Isaiah's incredible portrait, the roadmap, I guess, of what will happen from this point on, we're going to be looking more for clues about how, when, and why. Again, how God navigates history down this path while staying true to his promises and to his character. When can we expect the next waypoint on the journey? And why? Why the story unfolds like it does, the reasons and the motives behind it all. That's what's ahead for us now. To use the old cliche, the plot thickens. And that sets us up for what's ahead in our adventure this week as we look ahead. You know, that first waypoint on the trail, the first stop on Isaiah's roadmap of the future? Remember that? We said up above, dark times are ahead, exile is about to happen. Well, that first stop on the trail takes place this week. Dark days are indeed ahead for God's people. Time is up for the tiny kingdom of Judah. And for the past few decades, they've been kicked around like a political football. Assyria and Egypt, two powerful neighbors, one in the north, one in the south. They've put the squeeze on God's people like a slowly tightening vice. But in this week's episode, the end finally comes. And the tiny kingdom of Judah falls. And like God told Habakkuk, it is the Babylonians, and it is not pretty. In the epic movie that is the Bible, this scene plays out in slow motion, painful, full of emotion, full of heartache. Picture it. Picture an unsuspecting Judean village. Laughter as children play. Chatter as women draw water at the well. Unsuspecting. Happy. Is that thunder in the distance? No, it's the hammering of horse hooves. And more. And more. Thousands of them, at full gallop, they glide across the fields. Determined shouts of soldiers, the ring of swords drawn, screams of shock, cries of pain, the whoosh of razor-sharp blades, the roar of fire. And then it's over. No laughter, no chatter. The sizzle of cooling embers, the sickening, lifeless silence. The unthinkable has become the inevitable. The cruel armies of Babylon roam the Judean countryside, and they won't be satisfied until Jerusalem itself is destroyed. Oh, how did it come to this? How did we get so far from Eden all the way to Babylon? How did things spiral down so far that we've fallen from Sinai and the promised land to dungeons and chains and wastelands. Well, Jeremiah is God's prophet, and he makes the answer as simple as it can be. Listen to the diagnosis. Jeremiah says, "Again and again, the Lord has sent you his servants, the prophets, but you have not listened or even paid attention. Each time the message was this: turn from the evil road you are traveling and from the evil things you are doing. Only then will I let you live in this land that the Lord gave to you and your ancestors forever. Do not provoke my anger by worshiping idols you made with your own hands. Then I will not harm you." That was the message. The Lord continues, "But you would not listen to me, says the Lord. You made me furious by worshiping idols you made with your own hands, bringing on yourself all the disasters that you now suffer. And now the Lord of heaven's armies says, because you have not listened to me, I will gather together all the armies of the north under King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, whom I have appointed as my deputy." That's Jeremiah 25, 4-9, page 1038 in your Chrono Bible. Wow. God's people have a track record where they have relentlessly, time and again, continued to set their hearts on their own plans, dreams, and desires. They have chosen to walk their own path. They continually give more value, more weight, more energy, more drive, more obsession to objects of their own creation than to their relationship with the Creator God. The same attitude that closed the gates of Eden to Adam and Eve have now collapsed the walls of Jerusalem. God's people once were enslaved in Egypt. Now they walk a long road to Babylon in chains. God told them this would happen, and God keeps his promises. All of them, even the ones we wish would not come true. This week, hope is lost, but it is not gone. In this dark time this week, we will also meet a remarkable young man named Daniel. He's a reminder that there are a faithful few still out there, a faithful few remain. And God will use him to deliver hope not only to his own people, but to you and me as well in the days ahead. Plus, though the Babylonians take many Israelites captive, Jeremiah stays behind in Jerusalem. And God uses him to predict a future and a hope for his people. And best of all, God uses Jeremiah to show us all the core problem with his people and with all the people. The problem that keeps them stuck in this pattern of failure in their relationship with God. Jeremiah is going to show us where the problem lies and God's incredible plan to fix that problem once and for all. All right, my friend, enjoy the journey this week. Hey, how's it going for you so far? I'd love to hear from you. Hit me up on Facebook. If you're not already part of the Word in the Wild Facebook group, just search for it on Facebook and join in. This week, I'm going to go ahead and post a little printable for you that is all about those 7 plot points in the future that Isaiah gives us, that roadmap for the future. So look for that. I'll drop that there on Facebook. You can also find us on Insta. Look for thewild.us on Insta. Just nice to say hi, let me know how you're doing, send me a message. Hey, be sure you subscribe to this podcast as well. Make sure we stay connected that way. Find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, all the places. Hey, Word of the Wild, it's a 1-year Bible adventure with friends. friends. I am just in love with this thing, and I hope you are too. All you Word in the Wild Plus community members, hey, thanks again for making this journey a reality. I'll be seeing you in the wild, our private online community space this week. Everybody else, don't be a stranger. Once again, subscribe, follow Word in the Wild on Facebook, and find us on Insta. Word in the Wild is a Linehouse community. It's part of the Linehouse Community Network. It's a nonprofit organization with a mission to bring neighbors together to promote awareness, appreciation, and understanding of the Bible, because friendship and God's Word change lives and change cities. Word in the Wild is presented by the Lumavaz Podcast Network. Many thanks, as always, to my friends at Lumavaz. And with that, we're out of here. I'm Owen. I'm your host and your guide. Until next time, I'll be looking for you out there on the trail in the Word and the Wild. You have a great week.